I'm Jennifer Fairbanks, and I'm the creator of Bare Essentials, which is a drafting book and an online course. What I'm here to do is I am here to introduce you to a free online course that I'm offering to turn your Eve Classic or your drafted pattern into a sloper and then turn it into other designs. The course is going to be available on my website, or on my course website, which is a little bit different than actually my website. So I will include the links below for you to find. But this video will also show you how to do this on YouTube. The difference between the online course that I'm offering for free and also this YouTube video is that my online course is broken up into easy to manage segments. So each video is between 30 seconds and a minute. Some are a little bit longer, some are a little bit shorter, but what it is, it's a step-by-step. And so this video is a little bit of a teaser to show you what else I have available for online classes and drafting tutorials. This is just a quick little video to show you how I can take my Eve cup and turn it into a sloper. So the first steps I'm going to do is, well, the first thing I need to do is I actually need to remove my seam allowance. And I have seam allowance on here, which is 1/4 of an inch, which is 6 millimeters all the way around. So you want to go in and you want to remove this because we don't want to do any math and do any calculations and manipulation until we've actually removed that from here. So I'm just going to go ahead and jot that in, and I could easily just go ahead and kind of guess cut it, but I'd like to be a little bit more accurate than that. So if you notice, I'm kind of doing it just like a hair under the 1/4 of an inch because my pencil is just a little bit, between my pencil and my ruler, it ends up coming out right at that 1/4. So I'm going to do that. So this is my lower cup on the side. And I'm going to do that over here on this cup. So we're going to do this on all of the cup pieces. And if you're doing this on, so this is the Eve for the vertical. If you're doing this on the Eve for the regular, the cup shapes are a little bit different, so you might be looking at things a little bit differently, but same thing, you do want to remove all your seam allowances, and all the seam allowances are 1/4 of an inch on all of these. Okay, we have the same thing over here. I'm going to remove that. For some reason, I guess my printer doesn't go all the way to the edge, so I kind of lose a little bit of that here. It's okay. And you may notice that my patterns do not have any notches on them, because when you're dealing with 900 variations, it's a little hard to be precise with notches, so I just know that my pattern pieces match, so the notches are not necessary. We will actually go ahead and put a notch in here, but I am not going to do that right at this second. I need to remove my seam allowances first. And so this is one that I have actually this has been altered for the regular band, and I'm actually going to, since I'm using this for that regular wire band, I'm just going to modify it because we want to use the sloper for however you're going to be using it. Okay. And I'm just going to go ahead and trim and cut on those lines I just drew. So if you feel more comfortable using your curves and actually drawing those in, I just like to play a little connect the dots. And make sure that this eave fits you properly before you even go to this sloper, because otherwise it's kind of pointless. Okay. So you see my patterns are looking smaller and smaller. Okay, so I'm now to my pattern without seam allowances on it. So I'm just going to go ahead, I'm just going to jot on here where my wire is. And we have the other indications. We have the front, the apex, the side. This is my, basically the center seam that goes right in the right in the middle of the cup. So I just want to make sure that you know where everything is before we start messing with this. And of course this is our strap. Okay, so I'm going to go and I'm going to take and I'm going to connect each of these tip points. So the tip of this one to the tip of this. Okay, so I am connecting the tips. I am not doing that on my wire line, which is why I wrote the wire on there. So I'm going to do that over here, so from the apex to the front. And you may be noticing that the curved amounts are quite different on each one of these pieces. And those should be the same, so I probably got a little carried away with cutting. So now what we don't have on here is where the apex is. So we need to figure that out, and the easiest way to do this is we're just going to line this up, edge to edge, and basically create our apex right there. So from that point, I'm going to take that to that wire line, and from that point over here. Oops, of course I didn't get all the way, not a very straight line. Right to there. Now that we've drawn all of our lines on here, what we need to do is we actually need to go in and reverse engineer and figure out how much curves are on these cups. Now you might be like, well, you made the pattern, so what are the curves? The problem is that I created 900 something variations for the vertical cup and like 600 variations for the regular. So it gets a little bit more complicated. So what I did is I started with a base size, and I had my set curves based on that base size for that set wire. Now as I started grading it for the different wires, if the wires, if I needed a bigger wire, that curve actually got a little bit smaller. And if I needed it for a smaller wire, that curve actually got bigger because the horizontal measurements needed to basically stay about the same. So because of that, we can't really go back and compare it to the draft. So if you're working with Bare Essentials and you're drafting from scratch, you're kind of doing this reverse. So you're starting with your measurements, then you're going to your horizontal amount, and then from that horizontal it gives you the curves. Now what we've done here is we've actually gone and you've given them all the information, and we've gotten the cup and now we have to go back and figure out our curves. Because with all the different work that you do with basically truing the cup up after you've got your curves in there, your curves end up changing a little bit from what you start with. So we want to actually figure out where the high point is on these curves and figure out what the high point is and what the percentage is. So we're going to do this easy. Now right here, these are supposed to be identical curves, and I can tell right here I actually got a little bit chop happy because I don't even see my dotted lines. I see my dotted lines here, so I'm going to use this as a comparison. So I'm just going to take a look, and I'm going to fold this and kind of just take a look, and you might be able to see against the wood background is that this is actually a completely symmetrical curve, or if it's not, I'm just going to move it a little bit so it is. So I find that high point of the curve, and then I'm just going to do kind of a little hash mark right there. If you look over here, this is a little different. So if you're working on the vertical cup, you're going to see that it's not right in the middle. It's a little bit offside. Now, if you're working with the regular cup, it's going to be a little bit more centered. So I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to try and kind of find where, see, I don't know if you can kind of see, I'm trying to find where that curve kind of comes about. So I'm going to zoom up a little bit so you can see. So I've got that line that I drew kind of there. And so as opposed to bringing it all the way over here where you've got that overlap, I'm just doing it right here. And this is subjective. There isn't an exact spot because I don't have notches on here. So you just want to find the about point. And especially with your cutting, it may not be 100%. So we're just going to get about amounts. So I'm finding right about there. Now on this side, you can see it's not right smack dab in the middle. So I am going to kind of play around with this so it's not all the way here. Kind of like wanting to make part of this curve match. So on both pieces, so if we bring it over here, this doesn't really match as much. It kind of does. But you can also eye it the other way if you just want to eyeball it, but I'm trying to get that line there to figure out where that highest point on there is. And you can easily do it with a ruler too if you want to kind of take it and say, okay, where is the highest point? And that would be right here where I just marked. So there's a couple different ways you can find out where your actual high point is, and just do a hash mark. Now your top cups should be about the same. So I would just worry about doing this on the bottom cups, because what we did is this is essentially going to match up there, and this is going to match up there. So your curved amounts on the top and the bottom are going to be the same. So you can leave your top one alone and just see what the bottom, unless you were really bad at cutting on the bottom, then do it on the top. But we just want to have a little bit of consistency. So I went ahead and I had to go back and look to see which one it was I cut out, because I cut off all my lines, so I didn't know which one it was, and I'm pretty sure it was the 12 vertical. So I went ahead and I marked which one it was, and then in the chart in the back of the instructions there's two sets of measurements. One is imperial, one is metric, and so I went and I found the 40 vertical wire for the 12 vertical cup, and I wrote down these amounts just so I have it as reference. Now I'm going to take and use, you can use either your whichever ruler you have. So here I'm measuring at 3/4. I don't have a metric ruler, but that's basically about 20 millimeters. Over here we have this, and this looks like it is actually 3/8, which makes sense because this is about half of the amount of this one. And then I'm going to come over here, and this one is less than 3/8 by about a 1/16. So let's see, 3/8 into 1/16, that would be 6/16. So 5/16 would be this amount right here. Okay, so we have those numbers, and I'm going to go get a piece of paper so we can do a little bit of math. Okay, so I've got my paper here. So I'm going to just kind of jot down what the curved amounts are. I'm going to do just kind of a rough drawing of my cup. Yes, this is a very rough drawing of my cup. Okay, so for here, I've got this is 3/4. Here is 3/8, which is going to be mirrored on this side, which is also going to be 3/8. I'm sorry, not 3/8. This was 5/16. So this is going to be 5/16. And this one's going to be 3/8. Up here is also going to be 3/8. And this one's going to be 3/4. Now you're like, what am I going to do with those numbers? Well, give me a second and I'll tell you. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to count up and measure basically all the amounts that are going to be in the horizontal line. So this line right here is the horizontal. So that's kind of going in this line, right? Everything that basically gets sewn together across the horizon going this way. So we have 3/8, 3/4 on the top. Then we have 3/8 and 3/4 on the bottom. So what does that give us? Well, that basically gives us 3/4 times 3. And I am terrible at math right now. So I'm going to pull out my calculator. And we are going to do times 3, right? So basically I've got 2.25. That's the total amount of curves that we did for that top cup there. Actually for that whole horizontal line. Now I know that my horizontal amount is 11 and 7/32. So what is 7/32 broken down? 0.21875. And I want to figure out what percent this is of that. So we've got 2.25 divided by 11.21875. And so that is 20% of this. So this is, I've got 20% going into my horizontal curves. And you're like, what? Okay, now for my vertical seam, we've got the 5/16 and 5/16. Well, that makes 10/16 or 5/8. So if I were to take and turn that one into a decimal, so 0.625. We also need to figure out what that vertical amount is because this has to do with the vertical amount. So I'm going to take and I'm going to measure that straight line here, and that's about 4.5. So I've got 4.5. And so this is actually only half of the whole vertical, so I'm going to do times 2. So that would be 9 for the total vertical amount. And then I want to figure out what percentage is this of that. So 0.625 divided by 9 equals, and I've got about 7%. 0.69%, we're going to round up to 7%. So my curves on this particular cup is sitting at a total of 27% of the cup. Now, everyone is going to be a little bit different. I believe I started my base size at 30. So some of you might be around 35, some of you might be around 20. So this may vary a little bit, and definitely you know, feel free to share what yours was. So if you want to comment below and let us know what your cup and wire was, so we have an idea of what your total percentage was. And so now we've got our percentage. We are then going to have to figure out how to put this into our cup curve chart for our sloper. And you're like, wow, this is a whole lot of math. Well, not really. Just take it one step at a time. The first one we did was we figured out the horizontal curve amount, and then we figured out the vertical curve amount. So this was that vertical amount here times 2 for the entire cup, and so this is 7% of the entire cup for in here. Okay, so we're going to come back to those charts in a little bit. So we're going to go on to cutting some more stuff. So once we've got our measurements, we can cut off all of these curves. So I'm just going to cut on my straight lines. You're like, well, what are you doing? My curves are gone. Well, once we know how much the curves we need for our own eaves. So this is implying that this one fits us perfectly. So if you had to make adjustments, you want to be making sure that you use the curves or whatever your adjustments are and not the ones just from the pattern, because your adjustments, those are the important ones. Okay, we've got those. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually tape these together. Starting to match it up at the apex, so here at the tip. And if it's not 100%, it's not, I don't want to get that. It's not super big deal. I mean, there's a lot of room for error when you're drafting, and you'll be between your cutting and sewing and your pencil width. There is a lot of little things that can happen that you'll end up having to make adjustments down the line to each of your individual patterns. So we are well on our way. Don't worry that that doesn't line up over there. This is totally fine. This is supposed to be like this. And you can see we have a little point over here. So I'm actually going to take a curve and get a sharp pencil. That's the sharpest one I have here. And I'm just going to smooth this point out. So kind of get rid of that point, and then I'm going to smooth this point out right here too. So kind of coming right down there. And then we can trim that point off. And don't worry, when we actually make our other patterns, once we create those designs, we will get anything back that we cut off. In the way of, once we add our curves, it'll be forced to kind of create that extra width there. So this is the first step to, well, not the first step to our sloper, but we have our sloper almost there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to get another piece of paper, and I'm going to trace this off to create a sloper. And I'm going to keep this one on hand just so I remember what it is I started with. Okay, I have my piece of paper behind it, and I'm actually going to trace off. Now this can also work really well if you have a light box and you want to trace on top of it. I'm just going to put a pattern weight here, and I just sharpened up all my pencils. Make sure you have one at least with an eraser. Here, I will start with my daughter's Elsa and Anna pencil. And I'm going to try and get, as you can see, sometimes tracing is not so great if you didn't do a great job cutting. Oops, I might hit my finger there. Make sure the paper doesn't kind of bunch up in there. So try and keep your finger to hold the paper flat as you're drawing it. You don't want the paper to move around on you. And you're like, well, what were all those numbers that we already took? Well, we're going to come back to that, but I don't want you to get so overwhelmed with numbers that we don't get to do some fun stuff first. So here we are, and obviously I'm going to just mark right here where that horizontal line came across. Okay, so this is where that horizontal was on the cup. And then I'm going to take, and I'm going to draw from where that horizontal line was right back to where the apex was. And hopefully my pencil lines are dark enough. I'm going to darken that one a little bit. And straighten this one since it's a little bit wobbly. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to just do some kind of notes out here. This is my horizontal, right? And this was my vertical, right? Now, if you have not read through my book, you might be a little bit confused. So I'm just going to kind of get you as much information as I can here right now. This is very similar to the first step that we do from our draft. So you would actually take your draft and come over to this point. Now I'm not going to give you all of our trade secrets. So you're going to have to read the book for some of that. And I'm actually just this is kind of a little teaser to show you that we can create a sloper and kind of what you can do with it. I'm going to be doing an online course that actually is going to show a whole bunch of different variations to show you that you really, once you have a base size, whether it's my Eve or whether it's a pattern that you have drafted for yourself, and it honestly doesn't even have to be with my method. If you had a lot of success with Christina Shin's method or with Beverly Johnson's method, you're welcome to take her, basically their drafted cups, and as long as you can extrapolate how much the curve amounts are, and basically create this type of sloper, then we can actually go on and create, basically utilize the sloper as we're going to be utilizing it. If the drafting method that you have learned on does not give you an output that you can do this in, you know, you can always work with Bare Essentials or try out my Eve pattern for this. So what I'm going to do is we are going to kind of draw some lines in here. I'm going to get some colored pencils. Oh, I thought this was red. I got red, I'm sorry, I've got blue, green, and let me get the red. That was brown and red. So it kind of depends on whichever one you would like to have as your main color. I think I'm going to do my horizontal as blue. So I'm just going to draw in blue. And you want to try and keep your pencils fairly sharp. So if you have a color, sharpener nearby, so you can keep them sharp. I think I'm going to do my vertical as green. And then you're like, well, what is the red? Well, the red is going to be my diagonal. So imagine this is kind of all cupped together. And if it's easiest, what I can do is I can just show you, kind of keep this cupped together so you give you an idea of where we are doing things. So you kind of have an idea, and no, this is, we are not making a cone bra. So if we want to make a vertical seam going straight up, well, we can do that, and we can just take this line, and this does not have to be precise. It does not have to be exactly in the middle of the cup. These are guidelines, so this is actually, it can be wherever you want it to be. I like to try and make it as in the middle as you can. If your strap point is right in the middle, you can do it to the strap point. I'm going to just try and maybe kind of take and divide the middle of my vertical and take it up. So I'm going to take that, and this is also now a vertical. Right, so this basically drew that line straight up here. So that kind of continues that seam up here. Okay, so what's a diagonal? A diagonal would be going from here down this way. So basically your diagonal is going to split these two spaces in half. So I'm going to take and do a red line there. And then so it's going to come in here between these two spaces. And then it's also going to have one on the other side from way over here to over here. So we're going to split these two spaces. And what these are these are going to be guidelines for us to help figure out how to split up the curve amounts on our pattern. Now this is only stage one, and we're going to get to more. We're actually going to get to a little bit more of a star pattern. And I'm not going to get too much into this one because this is actually in my in my online course. So I'm going to show you kind of, you know, right now we've gone and we've done a cup Oops, my cup is terrible. So we've done a straight line, we've done a vertical here, and we've done diagonals here. Well, if you have a seam down here or up here, or a seam over here or here, or one over here or over here, or even over there or over there, well, we want to have guidelines for all those points too. So basically it's kind of taking and splitting each of these areas, and you're like, huh? Well, so let's say for this blue one going across, it's kind of coming where this is. We're going to take from here and split in the middle of. So this is a secondary point, and we're going to do the same thing from here. It's going to kind of create a cool little pattern. And so like I said, I'm not going to go too into details on these because this is actually in my course and in the book, and I don't want to give everything away, so I'll show you what I'm doing. And you're probably smart enough you can figure out what I'm doing, but I'm basically creating guides that are going to be in each of these points. And you're like, wow, that's really colorful and that's really pretty. Well, now we get to do something even more colorful. So now I'm doing all of my other diagonals. So it's basically creating kind of like a big star shape. So this is actually my sloper. And now I'm actually going to go from here, and we're going to work on putting together our percentages that we figured out into a chart to figure out what curves need to go where. To use the calculated percentages that you did in the previous videos, we need to come over to my blog, so it's blog.porcelynne.com, and then come over to Pattern Tutorials and go to the link for Eve Classic. Now this has all the videos and the calculators to figure out your size and shape, as well as the instruction manuals, but if you scroll all the way down to the very bottom, you'll see here we have the Eve Sloper Curve Calculator. Now I may put this in another location as well, but this one will always be here. So we're going to enter in the horizontal amount, which I had 11.21875, and then the vertical, which I had as 9. Now I did make a little note that actually it really should be 9.25 because I should have measured the curve and not the straight line. I'm going to just go ahead and make that here, and then we're going to add our 27% and then hit calculate. Now this is going to be our basic curve chart that we'll be able to use. So what you can do is you can basically highlight and print the selection. So if you highlight and print the selection, that way you can just print this part of your curves. Now, I'm not going to go into the dynamic sloper curves right now. That's something that I'll be discussing a little bit more on each of the classes for the sloper manipulation. But what you can do is you can enter this here, and then this gives you a chart that you can pretty much use for most of your drafts. Like I said, I'll get into the dynamic sloper curves, which just gives you a little bit more customization to modify these amounts just a little bit more. And then this will all be explained on how to use this when you start taking some of the sloper classes or follow the sloper instructions in the book. So I've just printed off my Eve Sloper Curve Calculator, and I have this all prepped. So I just want to kind of do a brief kind of summary of what this actually is. So every single line that comes to the outside but also hits at the apex is going to be at this main level. So we have the horizontal right here, the vertical, and then these diagonals that come here. Now those are the main ones, and those get the full curves. Now anything that's not coming right to the apex, we're just saying the apex right there, anything that's not coming to the apex would probably have about half the curve. Now remember, this is just a guideline. This is a chart to help you understand how to distribute the volume on the design. So you may still have to make some adjustments once you actually start working with your sloper, but this is your basic guide. And what this is saying is that if your whole design is one pattern piece, basically taking this and turning this into a dart, we're going to have a 3-inch curve here to account for the volume needed on here. And this is not really, you don't want to be having a one piece for something that's going to be this large. If you are, you probably want to do it in a knit fabric, and in that case your whole sloper would be slightly different. Here, if you're going to do 2 pieces, so let's say you're going to split left and right, and you're going to have a seam coming right down the middle. So you're actually going to take that vertical seam, and then at the top of the vertical and at the bottom of the vertical, you're going to add 1 3/16 inch. Or if you're going to say, let's say we're going to have this as a diagonal from this corner over to here, so that each of those diagonal lines will get that 2 3/4. And so that's not added to the middle, that's added to the middle of the outside line. Now you're like, well, what are all these other star points on here? These are what I consider to be the half amounts. So over here, this is the half vertical because it is halfway between the seam edge and here. So we have, if we were to grade this out, that'd be halfway between that and that. So same thing with the horizontal and the horizontal one. This would be the half grade, and the half curve amount would be up here too. Same thing with the diagonal. You have the half amounts anywhere that doesn't intersect through the apex. So that's kind of a brief summary of how this is. So if you have 3 pattern pieces, and this is basically, this column here is what we used for the eave or for your basic draft. So we are actually doing a 3-piece cup when we actually do our design. So this here is 3 pieces, and this is how we determined that we had 27% here, not 25, not 30, but that one specifically was 27%. And let's say if we want to do one with 4, 5, or 6 pieces. Now, the more and more you get, you may want to consider, well, I'll get to that in the sloper course. So, just a brief overview. So what I want to do now is I want to take and stabilize it so I can have a nice hard surface to work with. So this way it doesn't get messed up, and you can also, you probably want to make copies of this. Looks like I'm out of staples. So I will finish stapling that up, and I will cut this out, and I'll be back. So I finished stapling it, so I'm just going to cut out on all my outlines. So I want to make sure I keep that line so I actually know where that is. And so this is just a manila folder. Anything that you have that might be a little bit harder in surface, you can use. Cardboard might break down a little bit around the edges, and I'm actually cutting a little bit too far from the edges over here on this side, so the glare and this light's a little off, so I'm just going to come back in here and trim this down a little bit. I'm going to take my band
and turn my band into a usable sloper. So the first thing I want to do is I want to draw in my seam lines. And all the seam lines on here are 1/4 of an inch or 6 millimeters. So I'm just going to go in, I'm going to draw in every single one of these. Oops. And because I'm going to be cutting off this wire line, I'm going to be losing the number of the wire I'm doing, so I'm just going to put, this is for the 42 wire. The front is on the fold, so I don't do anything there. Okay, I'm actually going to leave the bottom as it is. The bottom is designed for 1/2 inch elastic, so I'm going to leave that. I'm just going to actually make my samples with the 1/2 inch elastic, so I don't need to do anything there. Scissors. My scissors have disappeared. Not sure where that happened. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut off, cut on my seam line. And if you had to go in and alter your pattern for a different width elastic, you can actually create a different band sloper for every single one of your elastics. It makes it a little bit easy, so you just have to grab the one that you're working on. Since this one is going to be for the 1/2 inch elastic, I can go from here. And this I'm going to cut right on that line. Okay, now on this one also we have the same seam allowances on our side. I'm going to leave it on the bottom. I'm going to remove it off of the top. And then I'm going to leave this back here okay, so I don't need to add anything back, so this is for the excuse me, for the hook and eyes. And then this is also for the 1/2 inch elastic. The way this was constructed, I don't believe I removed anything from there either. But if you made changes, you just want to make sure that you know exactly where your pattern is in relationship to how it's designed, what it's designed for. This is the 42 wire. So, let's get all this out of the way. And then I'm going to staple these and make a sloper on, make these a sloper. And actually before I do that, I need to adjust and fix my shape over here. It was very difficult to get these angles exactly right when I was doing the full range. I'm going to try and go in and make some adjustments, but what I would do is just come in here and cut those across, so that way you have a smoother transition from front to back. you can always come in and curve this a little bit more too if you'd like. Well, maybe I'll do that. Do a little bit better job cutting. Okay. So now we have a smooth transition without seam allowance that's going to go from here to there. So now I'm going to make this into my sloper. So I'm going to come in here and staple these down. I'll get that once I cut in. And when I can come in and get a few more staples, I do. So now my band is ready and has made it into a sloper.
Thanks for watching. If you would like to have more content like this, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, or leave a comment below. Thank you very much.